This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Hybrid Healing Hour. Today we are going to be discussing body composition analysis, and I have a very knowledgeable guest with us today. It's Bradley Davie, and he works with InBody. So Bradley, I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us how you got to where you are today.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. Gosh, I've always been into health and fitness for myself and just wellness and wanting to kind of follow trends. And when I was deciding to go to college, I ended up studying kinesiology and exercise science. And I got a degree also in teaching for physical education and health. And then the job market was kind of drying up in Maine at the time when I started that. So I decided I was going to move to California on a whim. And I found that personal training was quite popular here and got certifications there. And I ended up working for a company called Lifetime Fitness, where I was a metabolic specialist there doing testing for resting and active metabolics alongside the personal training. And they're actually using an InBody there. So I was looking to expand my career and try something new and improve my sales and marketing skills. And I got the job with InBody in late 2016, and I've been there coming up on 8 years now, and served just about every industry um, in healthcare, from anybody illness all the way to wellness and performance. And it's been a great opportunity to learn a lot and be able to teach people how to improve their care with the tools that we have.
It's amazing that InBody has been around that long, because it seems like it just exploded recently. A couple of years ago, never really heard the name of the company very much, and now you hear it all the time.
Yeah, the company was actually founded in 1996 and then came to the US in about 2000. And something interesting, not a lot of people know, when we first came to the US, GE actually sold InBodies alongside of DEXAs, because with a DEXA scan, you can't do that a lot, where an InBody was just as accurate as the DEXA and you could continue to test alongside of that. So they were selling them alongside the DEXAs. And then I think we realized that the service and the support for the products wasn't on par with what we would see that we could do. So we continued to build that market out. And I think with any company, it takes time to build market saturation and, your brand to get that exposure. But I think overall, people are taking a lot more care of their health and more responsibility for their health today. And then, there's a lot of push for people to measure body composition. So I think we've got a lot of support from the marketplace, and then also a great job going out into the marketplace ourselves and building the brand.
So yeah, I learned about InBody from a friend a few years ago. I'd say, was it 2019 maybe? And I was curious about like which one maybe for getting one for our office. And so I actually went and did a DEXA scan and I went and did the InBody first and did not drink any water in between and went straight to do a DEXA. And I wanted to compare the results. And I instantly fell in love with the InBody results. I actually didn't like the DEXA results. I didn't feel like it gave me as much as everybody raved about, and I didn't like the layout of it. The InBody is just so simple to understand and interpret and see it. It's just all right there in one area. So I would really love to just dive in to learn about not only InBody, but let's first talk about what is body composition analysis and why is this critical for anybody's journey for wellness?
I think having a starting point for wherever you're at, for how much weight you have, or muscle, or body fat, or water, gives us a really great way to be able to track progress over time. So I think that's the foundation. And then being able to use those insights to be able to continue to adjust plans or maintain motivation or accountability. I think there's a lot of pieces that it can help with along the way objectively to help us make progress, or even for you guys where you're using it for your patients, where you've got professionals that have more knowledge that they can use alongside of the product and support you in that way too.
Since we've been using body composition analysis in the office, I just don't understand why there's still scales in doctors' offices. The scales, I think, are so obsolete, and they don't give you enough information, that I think that you can't use that as a parameter of health anymore.
Right. Well, and there's many different types of body composition as well. So, I mean, here we are talking about InBody, but I mean, back in the day, people, if anybody wanted to know, like measuring the fat, they would do calipers. Or even now you can measure just with tape measure and, get the circumference of your waist. But the calipers would pinch the skin and kind of see how much that, fat is or whatnot. But now there's we discussed the DEXA. And then there's some other brands is like the Staiku, and that does body circumference as well. But why don't you go ahead and tell us how the InBody works to get all this measurements?
Yeah, well, the foundation of the technology is bioelectric impedance. So essentially what that means is you sit down, take your shoes and socks off, anything out of your pockets, any heavy articles of clothing that you might be wearing. We wouldn't want to have a jacket or a sweatshirt on. We kind of want to be in lightweight clothing if possible. And then you wipe the palms of your hands and the bottom of your feet. And those, we have electrolyte tissues that we provide with the InBody. So just water and salt. So you clean the surface of the hands and the feet. And it also adds a little bit of conductivity along the way for the consistency of the measurements that we're going to provide. And then you step up onto the scale. Your feet are on 2 electrodes each, and then you hold on to the handlebars, and there's 2 electrodes there as well. And then small, safe currents travel through your body's water, and we use the minerals and electrolytes to conduct that electricity. We are bioelectric beings, and we kind of just tap into that highway of electricity, and we're measuring the actual resistance to the electrical current that the cells are providing in the body. And then we come out with a lot of great information from that on the result sheet, where it can tell us, break it down into a lot of different components of body composition. Some of the things that separate InBody from anybody else in the marketplace. Number one, we're using those 8 electrodes, and that allows us to capture values for the whole body. Older forms of the technology were maybe just using 2 electrodes, one in the hand and one in the feet, and they were getting partial measurements for the impedance values. We're using multiple frequencies. So what that means is lower frequencies, maybe like 1, 5, 50 kilohertz. Those travel through extracellular fluid, which would be like your blood and your skin and your lymphatic system. And as the currents increase, and they go up to 1,000, even 3,000 kilohertz on some of our models, where those will actually penetrate cellular membranes, and we'll be able to capture intracellular value there as well. So that helps to get more complete measurements there. And then from all of that, we've actually eliminated the use of any type of empirical estimations. One of the big factors in that is we actually get trunk measurements separately. So the trunk is not just assumed included in the other values, but the empirical estimations come into place with any other device besides a DEXA, where we consider something like your age or your gender or your activity level or your ethnicity, and we compare our impedance values to those, and then the data ends up getting skewed closer to those values because we may not actually be getting the raw values. So the data can say, if you test one time and you're 20 years old, and then you test again and right after, and you tell the machine that you're 90, then it's going to assume that you have more body fat, probably less muscle when you're 90 than you did when you're 20. So with an InBody, you can be sure that we're just reporting the raw data. The only thing that changes is the scale that the numbers are reported on. So if you were 90, and you had that amount of muscle, it might look like you're in better shape for a 90-year-old than otherwise. So I think a lot of people have found trust in our product for those reasons. Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Johns Hopkins, all top medical facilities, probably 75% of all professional sporting teams use InBodies. The Mayo Clinic actually recently did a validation study for us where they showed at 98% accuracy compared to Adexa again for us. So we're really excited about all of that.
Well, that's we think it's an amazing machine, and I have really been happy with our purchase. Now, the other thing that comes along with having great technology is the ability to be able to interpret that technology, right? And that's you guys have training and you have certification that goes along with the testing.
Yeah, we've got a lot of resources for people with InBodies or even people that have done InBody tests. If you purchased an InBody, we have an InBody Academy, which includes everything from how to set the device up, how to prepare to use it, run the test, understand the result sheet, and we leave you with a bunch of other resources you can continue to learn. And then our website's an amazing resource. We've got hundreds of blog posts about anything from how body composition is affected by caffeine or alcohol or sleep or whatever topic you could imagine. They're there as well. And then a lot of different result interpretation guides too.
Awesome. Well, I would love to just go ahead and dive into interpreting an InBody report. If you could walk us through that, that'd be great.
Let's go. I'm going to share my screen
And for those
here.
of you listening to this podcast, you might want to go on our YouTube channel and actually watch so that you can see the results.
And we also have a map on our website too, if people listening aren't just your patients, where people could go and find a testing location where somebody might have one of these models and be able to get the result sheet for themselves too. So
That's great.
we're going to dive into a result sheet breakdown here where we're going to talk about different elements of the body composition. We got a sample result sheet here on the screen. And one of the first sections that it's going to show us here is this muscle fat analysis. So this is going to show us total weight, muscle, and body fat. And at the top of that graph, there's a down arrow, a dash inside of a dark gray area, and an up arrow. And inside of that, the dark gray area with the dash, right underneath that is the average for the height and gender of the person that tested. So we're going to be able to see how you might compare to an average population in terms of your weight, muscle, and fat. And this graph actually shows up in 3 different shapes that we like to look for to help simplify the reading of it to get an idea. So one would be a C shape, where if you have more weight and body fat than you do muscle, we would consider that a weak body type, where we want to increase skeletal muscle mass and decrease the body fat mass. If all the bars lined up, it would show up as an I shape, and that's pretty balanced. We'd probably want to consider where that is along that graph. If it's beyond the average, we would probably want to reduce the body fat and weight, but maintain the muscle. If it's around the average, we probably want to build more muscle. And then a strong body type would be a D shape on here. So if the weight and body fat are below that skeletal muscle graph, then it's a D shape. So that's going to be a stronger body type.
I want to just chime in for a second. If you go back to that, the average is the gray area you're saying, right? Oh, yeah, I see how you have that. Perfect.
Yep, it's the dark gray area here, and these 3 100s are a percentage, and that's indicating it's 100% at the average for that height and gender. Right below that on the result sheet, we show the BMI next to the percentage of body fat. A BMI is historically, a health risk indicator, where it's just looking at somebody's weight divided by their height. And that really doesn't tell us much about health risk associated with how much muscle or body fat they have. So we actually show the percentage of body fat alongside of that, and gives us a little bit better idea of health risk there. And for a lot of people that don't have a lot of muscle, and their BMI might fall in that normal range, and they have high amounts of body fat, the BMI is not doing a good job at showing health risk. On the other end of it, if somebody has a lot of muscle and the body fat's lower, the BMI could still be above that healthy range, and they could be considered unhealthy, but in reality, they are healthy. So, and we can also talk about another output that's coming up, kind of looking at skeletal muscle mass and proportionality. It's called a skeletal muscle index, where it adds up all the lean mass in your arms and your legs, and then it divides it by your height. So similar to a BMI where it's just weight to height, this is looking at lean mass in your arms and legs divided by height. And that tells us, do we have enough muscle to support our body weight? And it's a good indicator of something called sarcopenia. So as we age, that can become a risk for us too. Next, we have a segmental lean analysis. So this is looking at our lean mass, which anytime we see or say lean mass, we're talking about bone, muscle, and water. And this is by each arm and leg and trunk. So there's also an average bar here where the hundreds here on this graph are telling us, do we have enough lean mass to support our weight? And there's a second bar underneath it with a percentage where we want all of those to be at 100% or higher. And that means we have enough lean mass to support our weight. So the results that we're looking at here, this person is below on all of them. So we already knew that we needed to build muscle from the muscle fat graph at the top of the result sheet. This will show us in more detail where we could do that. And we can also look at this in ways where we can spot maybe opportunities or imbalances there, where we would say if there's a 3% or greater difference between your right leg and your left leg, there might be some type of maybe previous injury there or current injury there with inflammation. If there's 6% or greater in your arms, same thing. We're looking for those where somebody might have, a dominant side where that imbalance could in the future cause some problems for them. And then as we look at the legs compared to the trunk, or the arms compared to the trunk, or the arms to the legs, a 10% or greater difference would indicate to us that there's a greater risk there too. So a lot of different ways to look at this, and maybe even work with a personal trainer or a physical therapist, or, find ways where we can create wellness or health fitness programs to support that too. At the bottom, we've got a history graph. So this is showing us from test to test. Every time you come and do one, it's going to track your progress as long as you use the same ID. And we can see what's changed there and follow along that journey. One of the things that is unique on our current 380 model or a 570 like you guys have or higher is that it actually shows intra and extracellular water. So we see the total amount of water in the body, and then we also see how much of it is inside the cells versus how much is outside the cells. And this score here is looking at extracellular water divided by total body water. So how much of your water is in your blood and your skin and your lymphatic system? We need water there, but if we're accumulating too much of it, then that could be an indication of edema or inflammation for many different reasons. And a normal range for that is 36 to 39%. And in my experience, I've been in professional sporting teams' locker rooms, Olympic locker rooms, and those players are usually closer to that 36%, sometimes a little bit lower. I've tested many people with diabetes or lymphedema or rehabilitation patients where they might end up closer to 39, or if there's heart failures, we might be in the 40s, lymphedema, low 40s kind of thing. So this gives us an indication over time of the change in the water as it moves into the body, in and out of the cells. Some people would also call this a good indication of metabolic efficiency, where we consume food or we drink water and it comes into our body, it goes into the cells, we use it to create energy in our metabolism, it comes back out and out of our body in a lot of different ways. And this kind of gives us an indication of the sensitivity of that or the movement of that.
On that note,
over time,
I was going to say, on that note, we actually work with some dietitians who have taught us and trained us as well that we use that as an inflammatory marker, like you mentioned. So when I have a patient who is high off the chart and I see that steadily and consistently, and we're not seeing it improve with lifestyle modifications, that tells me that it's time we should probably check their gut And so we go into like a leaky gut panel and check their sensitivity markers. And I've seen that significantly improve their inflammatory markers and reduce that marker specifically.
That's fantastic. I think there are a lot of things that could cause this to move and change. Obviously the food that we consume can impact this. If we were to think about like diet, um, and foods that might cause this, like higher sodium diets or alcohol, caffeine in excess can cause this jump up. I actually, when I started using the InBody, somebody taught me how to use this output as like a lie detector, where if I had trained somebody 1 week and then we did the InBody test and they came back the next week and this score had jumped up, it was probably an indication that they had maybe like a really salty steak and they had drank a fifth of vodka or something. You know what I mean? It's like things that are pulling water out of the cells and causing this type of inflammation to happen. And injuries can cause this. Like you're saying, maybe a leaky gut could do something like this where we're seeing that inflammation. And on our 770, 580, 970 models, we actually see this edema score by segment. So we also see it by arm and leg and trunk. And I've heard others talk about looking at that trunk edema score in comparison to something like a leaky gut or nutraceutical therapies. And there's another extension to this where on our newer models, we actually show a score called phase angle next to this ECW, TBW score, where phase angle is actually a more granular measurement of like the cellular integrity and strength within a region. And there's a high relationship between this edema score and phase angle, where typically if somebody has a lot of muscle and strength, the phase angle is higher because what happens when we're doing these readings is the current will get slowed down more. And the phase angle is a measurement of how fast that current is coming through. And stronger, healthier phase angles are better. Where if somebody has less muscle, more edema, the current's going to travel faster because there's less cellular resistance there. So over time, those are a couple outputs that help us indicate to that.
Interesting.
This one here's is showing us the segmental edema scores that I was talking about, where we can see that by each arm and leg and trunk. Couple other outputs, I think, when we think of health risk overall, we show segmental body fat as well as a visceral fat score. Visceral fat's going to be the fat that's internal in and around your organs, putting pressure on the organs, kind of choking them out, if you will, and causing some metabolic issues where we want to monitor that. I think if there's one output that everybody would want to see, it would probably be the visceral fat. It tends to be the most important one.
Yeah, that's something that we really look at, and we tell people, based on your visceral fat level, you are not healthy. There's new studies coming out that even looks at epicardial fat as a marker of cardiac health. And so that is a parameter that we focus on. And as people lose weight, we watch that visceral fat level come down too.
So I know you suggest, having a visceral fat level of 10 or less, but is there an ideal level?
I've been asked that question a lot by a lot of different people, and I think it kind of just depends on what you're looking to achieve. I think from what I've heard and the kind of general population, probably 7 or 8 and lower is best. But interestingly enough, I was asked by a professional basketball team once what they thought was low because they had a player that had like 2. And they were concerned maybe that he didn't have enough support for his organs internally to play this sport and take the impact. So I think it kind of vary, but research shows that we want to keep it below a level 10 or 100 centimeters squared of visceral fat. And that would be, you could also go and get a CT scan of a cross section of your visceral cavity. So if your trunk was like a loaf of bread and we took out one slice and we were looking down on those organs, then that's kind of the fat that's marbled in and around the organs there. So I would say 8, 7 lower would be best. And over time, finding ways to maintain that or reduce that would be super important.
I personally have recommended 5 or 6 from just reading a lot of material and whatnot, but I do not like to see it less than 3 is what I mean, we do need some of that visceral fat to protect our organs as well.
Absolutely. Something else that we show here on the result sheet would be a basal metabolic rate. So if we were to take all of the lean mass in our body, that's muscle, water, and bone, and we were to think about what is the value or the energy that's created in a 24-hour period of time for all that to function along with your organs, the basal metabolic rate is that resting value, kind of a baseline measurement for probably the minimum amount of calories we want to consume in a day to maintain that lean mass. And then from there, we would probably want to think about what else are we doing beyond that? Well, how many calories do we think we're burning in general beyond that? Because we probably want to add to that. A lot of times what people will do with this basal metabolic rate is if you're not going to actually measure all of the calories you're consuming, then you could do a calculation to get to a total daily energy expenditure. And to give you an idea, somebody that's probably sedentary, we'd multiply this by 1.2. So we're adding 20% of the calories, assuming that we're going to burn a little bit more during the day. Where on the other end of the day, if somebody's really active, maybe an athlete or a bodybuilder, we might multiply this value by 2 because we're going to assume that we maybe want to build more lean mass or we're using a lot of energy. And somewhere along that scale, most people would fall to be able to get an idea of how many total calories. And then if we had a goal maybe to lose body fat or lose visceral fat, then we might try to put ourselves in a little bit of a deficit where we're going to figure out how many calories we are going to burn, and then we might consume a little bit less than that, but still above that basal metabolic rate to make sure we give our organs and our lean mass enough to survive.
I'm so glad you just said that, because when people think calorie deficit, I mean, there's so many people who think they need to eat less than the BMR. And I explained, no, this is what you need for your body to function, for your body to survive. And like you said, when you say calorie deficit, it's just that you might not add the calories that you're going to burn with your workout, but you're at least going to maintain or get the basal metabolic rate.
And diet cultures have even popularized people eating 800 calories in a day, and that's probably 400 calories below what their basal metabolic rate is, which is absurd to me.
I agree. I mean, even small people that are, so I know that you will burn more calories. Your BMR will go up when you have more muscle mass. I see that all the time, and people don't understand that. So even very large, obese or morbidly obese people have actually a high BMR a lot of times because they're walking around. They have lots of muscle because of their weight naturally is building muscle with every step they take. So we always want to make sure, you're not losing that muscle so you can actually continue to have a nice metabolic rate. And it's just shocking that I don't really see very many people who their BMR is less than 1100. Rarely I see that, but it's very safe for people to assume they should be eating at least 1100, 1200 calorie diet.
I wonder from your perspective, what would happen if somebody pretty consistently was consuming, let's say 800 calories, but their basal metabolic rate was 1200? What's the impact of that on somebody's overall health?
I guarantee they're going to lose muscle mass and their BMR is going to decline, and your
body's going to start cannibalizing your own tissues for nutrients. We're big fans of fasting, but fasting is short periods of reduced caloric intake, not perpetual long periods.
Right.
And there's a difference.
I mean, I can use myself as an example. At one point, I was working out hardcore and I was fasting and, doing the intermittent fasting. I was only eating between 1 and 7 p.m. And I was not getting, I tracked my calories. I was just probably getting enough, but I was not building muscle. I guarantee my body was just breaking down my muscle mass because I wasn't giving my body the supplementation, the proper supplementation it needed. I probably needed to give myself about another 500 more calories. So what I did is I eventually stopped fasting and, I just extended my fasting window a little shorter, I guess, or made it shorter, and increased my caloric intake. And sure enough, I started building more muscle and getting more lean. You really need calories. That's our energy. That's the fuel that you would put into your body. And so when people go into a deficit, I say they're almost like in a starvation mode. Their body doesn't know when they're going to eat again, and it holds on to the fat and starts breaking down other nutrients, like he said. So
some other outputs that we have on here too. We're showing in the top right hand corner of the results sheet, you actually get an idea of how you compare to that average population. So it's going to tell you what changes you would need to make in your body fat or your lean body mass, which is also synonymous with fat-free mass. And for this person, it's showing to a reduction in 37, almost 38 pounds of body fat and an increase in 38 pounds of lean mass. So we really get an idea of where we fall on that scale, and this is a good opportunity for some goal setting. Obviously, for this one, we probably want to break it down into increments and simplify it a little bit. But I feel like with all this information, you get a really great look at how you can objectively measure your health and then also make changes over time.
I have one question that people assume a lot, and I'd like you to explain exactly what the trunk area is, because I think a lot of people assume their butt is in the trunk area.
So imagine a lifeguard with a one-piece bathing suit on. What fits in that one-piece bathing suit would be in the trunk, okay. And then everything outside of it would be those segments of the arms and the legs. Okay, so the trunk is part of the bathing suit, or the butt is part of the bathing suit. Part of it. So if you imagine the way that our measurements are happening is, we take, say on your 570, for instance, there's 15 measurements that happen. And one of the measurements is from your right arm to your left arm. And the other one is from your right foot to your left foot. So the current's going to travel up and then back down. And then another one would be from the right arm to the right leg. Another one from the left arm to the left leg, right arm to left leg, left arm to right leg. So there's these different crosses that are happening, and the current's going to take the most direct path through there. So it kind of ends up where those crosses end up in those measurements. Okay. Well, I think that was a very detailed explanation of everything, and I'm so thankful for that breakdown. I mean, we review it in the office with our patients, and but sometimes they get home and they forget or whatnot. And I love how you mentioned, with the difference between a DEXA and InBody is you can't do the DEXA that often. Whereas we like to implement InBodies with all of our hormone replacement therapies to show the increased muscle mass with testosterone weight loss packages. And we have them come in monthly. So I really like to do this every month. Not only does it help hold accountable, but I like to see those changes on paper. And like we said, the scale does not show the truth. So people get so frustrated or annoyed and want to give up when they don't see that scale change. But then I can show them, look, I'm seeing all the positives. Or they might be happy the scale changed, but then I look at them like, you didn't do it the right way. We got to build that muscle mass, or let's go back to the drawing board. So it's so effective in what we do.
And there's so many people out there now on unsupervised weight loss medications, which means someone's writing them a prescription, giving them a weight loss medicine, and they're kind of on their own. I think anyone on a weight loss program or on a weight loss medication should be getting a body fat analysis done at least monthly. Some come in more, some come in maybe a little bit less, but you need to know what you're doing. You need to know where you're going. You need to know how's your muscle doing, not just how your fat and how your clothes are fitting.
So I've always said muscle is the currency of health and aging. And so now I've read a lot they're using that term, muscle is the currency of longevity and anti-aging. And so we are big advocates on muscle, building muscle. But can you tell us, is having good muscle mass on the InBody equivalent to having good strength?
Certainly not. And what you were just talking about kind of made me think of, how the InBody and your results or your body composition would change alongside of something like a weight loss medication, say a GLP-1, or it's kind of similar for if somebody started a ketogenic diet where water is going to be the bigger change in all of this. So if somebody's starting these different programs, monitoring the water that's inside and outside your cells is really important, because what will happen is you have, let's say today you have, 100 pounds of muscle. That's a lot for somebody, but you start a weight loss medication, you're going to start to lose that water from inside your muscle. You start a ketogenic diet, you're not going to get the sugars and the water back into the cells. So the loss in muscle mass is actually going to come from loss of water inside the cells. So we want to make sure that we monitor that alongside of things like body fat. But if you're looking at the result sheet and you lose lean mass, say you lose that water, but you don't change your body fat at all, that means the percentage of your body that's made of fat is going to increase. So somebody might actually see a fat percentage increase and think that they're not doing well, but in reality, they're actually losing water, which might not be the best thing for them either. But it's important to look at the raw values and have accurate changes in those raw values that aren't assumed by estimations or other things like that change.
So, Bradley, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a game-changing paper that just came out of California very recently. I think it was out of Stanford, about how we age. And this paper says that we used to think that human beings age linearly, right? We gradually got older and weaker, and things started failing. The new paper says that they have found that there's two major ages where we hit a wall, where we decline significantly. That's at the age of 44 and at the age of 60. Now, we'll have to see how this plays out, and I think this is so big that I think we're going to have a whole podcast on this. But I think that we need to start focusing on those two ages more so than everything else. That's the time to be your healthiest, right? You really should be knowing your body composition around the age of 44 and then again around the age of 60. Your nutrition should be optimized. Everything should be done to prevent that massive decline at those ages.
Absolutely. Why not every other age also, leading up to that, so you are in good shape as you go into it. But certainly when we think about longevity and anti-aging, perhaps, I think, body composition and, some of the indicators that we've talked about are great ways to track that. And I think, Deanna, maybe you were alluding also to grip strength with your question earlier as an indicator of overall health, where our body composition analyzers give us a good idea of the quantity of that muscle, but the quality of that is going to be different. So our ecosystem also includes grip strength dynamometers, where you can test the strength of each hand. And over time, that's going to give us a good indication of the quality of that muscle too, which is a leading indicator of somebody's longevity.
Yeah, we started doing grip strength in our office, and it's amazing. I think I have a few patients who really look forward to it, and it has become a goal now for themselves, like to see how many pounds of pressure they can grip and squeeze. So it's kind of like a game.
Grip strength should be a vital sign. It should be a vital sign like all the other ones that we're tracking.
So
and kind of in relation to that, I also see others implementing balance assessments too.
Absolutely.
Where we're like strength plates and force plates for the feet, and looking at how we distribute the balance of our weight too as we age, and as we get older, that balance shifts and changes, and we want to also make sure we maintain that. So I kind of see that in alignment with a grip strength as well.
Yeah, I think I found a paper interesting where they were talking about balance, or being able to stand on one leg was linked with Alzheimer's, if I remember, or dementia. So I always like to do that as a little test too. So we do have a few questions for you. So can people with a pacemaker or defibrillator or an implant in their chest, can they have an InBody performed?
So we would say no on the pacemaker simply because it runs on an electrical current and you're sending an electrical current through your body to get these measurements. So people can test on it. There's no known cases of issues, but you probably want to get some clearance from, say, a cardiologist where at times people are able to turn it off where the test takes just a minute and you could turn it off and turn it back on and everything could be okay with that. Um, the other contraindication for testing on the InBody would be somebody who's pregnant, not necessarily for any harm to the baby, but more that there's tissue developing and a lot of things changing where we're not able to accurately show that measurement, although there is research happening right now to be able to show that change over time. Of then say with any type of other implant in our body, we would want to think about what that implant is made of. So if it's like a knee replacement that's made of something that's conductive, like a metal, then that is going to actually show up as more conductive lean mass within the body. Whereas if it's something that's non-conductive, then say like an implant, like the walls of an implant, like a breast implant, are going to be non-conductive. It's not strong enough for a current to pass through it. So it'll just be extra weight that ends up being body fat on the scale. So it kind of just depends on what it's made of.
And we've come across a few cases where people with artificial limbs can't do it because it just won't read it.
Yeah, we actually have a special model in our series, and it's called our body water analyzer, where somebody would lay down on a bed and you would clip the electrodes to them and you would get the weight separately. But on this scale, we've actually got the ability for us to not use that clip, say we don't have a leg, then we can tell the machine that this person doesn't have that leg, and we can still do that measurement, but not on the standing devices where we want to have the person standing and the fluid balanced, and then you step up onto the scale and you run the test there. We can't do that without a limb, but we do have a solution for it if somebody did need to.
So can you tell us how hydration impacts? I know you talked a lot about, the water and whatnot, but does being hydrated impact the InBody result of that day or leading up to it?
Essentially, we're getting a snapshot of your body water, your total water, or intra and extracellular water, depending on which model it is for wherever you're at. So whether you're dehydrated or you are super hydrated, then it doesn't really make a difference in terms of the results because we're still going to get a measurement. A lot of people think like I shouldn't do the test because I'm not hydrated, but I would still do the test, and then we've got an idea of where we're at, and then we can hydrate better and come back and we can see those changes in the results as well. If somebody were to any type of food or drink that's still in our GI tract is going to show up on the InBody as actual body fat. So if somebody were to drink a half gallon of water before they stepped on the scale to do the test, then that would all still probably be in the stomach and it would show up as extra weight that's body fat. So want to hydrate well the day before and after the test.
Okay. And there are a few guidelines for checking an InBody, right? So like recommending to stand up for, a couple minutes before?
Yep. Yeah, so things that we would want to do in addition to maintaining our fluid before we do the test on the day before. We want to try to test at the same time every day if possible, meaning at that time, we would want you to go to the bathroom before you did the test and probably not eat at least 3 to 4 hours before. But the more fasted you are and the cleaner your GI tract is, the more we're going to get to your weight without anything in there. So if there's a certain time of the day where you could produce that consistently, that's going to be the best. Usually for most people, it's in the morning. They wake up, go to the bathroom. Hopefully they can make an appointment with a doctor early in the day. But over time, with whatever food you did have in your GI tract or liquid, that's if we can maintain consistency of that with the time of day, it's probably going to be similar for each one. And as you said, we want to stand upright for 5 to 10 minutes. That's simply because the testing protocol is we're in a standing position. So if somebody were sitting for a long time or laying down and then they stood up, that fluid's going to move in the body, and that could fractionally impact the way the results show up. And also, we wouldn't want to exercise, especially high intensity exercise, for 24 hours previously, if possible, but certainly no exercise around the test. That's going to heat up the lean mass in the body and move the fluid around, and that can impact the results. Differences in clothing. So if I wore jeans on one day and I came in and I wore shorts on one day, the difference in that weight, maybe a pound or two, that could impact the results that we see, because that's going to be weight that's non-conductive body fat. Try to avoid consuming alcohol or lots of caffeine before the test. Those are both cellular dehydrants, so we want to avoid those. And then obviously lotion or oils or anything on the hands or the feet, those type of things. So that would be ideal testing, pre-testing protocol.
And I know I mentioned, or don't recommend females who are on their menstrual cycle to do it. I usually try to plan around that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So typically at this time, females retain more water outside their cells, from what we notice. And I think the risk here is that if somebody had tested on their menstrual cycle and then they came back and they tested again and they were not, and when they did, they had more water in their body, and then they come back and they're not holding on to that water, then the body fat mass, if we're just looking at the percentages, could change. But I don't think it's bad to test at that time, as long as you know that that's what we're looking at.
Awesome. Well, I have learned so much, and I hope our audience did too. Can you go ahead and tell our audience how they can find you, or a little bit about like the InBody website and your podcast as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, InBodyUSA.com would be our website, and a lot of great resources there. I was going to mention too, if it's interesting to anybody and they would like to have a scale for their home, we have bathroom scales that we call currently it's an H30 model, and connects to an app, and you could get a test done there at your home and store the data in your app on your phone. And you could find those on the website as well. I did start a podcast recently called Beyond the Scale, and you two were wonderful guests there, and excited to release that soon. We're in the works of getting that actually published now on our website and on our YouTube channel for InBody. So those should be out soon if you want to follow along there.
Awesome. I'll also put all that in the show notes. Thank you, Bradley, for having for educating everybody and coming onto our show.
And thank you for being our first remote guest.
Yes.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate you guys.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks. The information contained in this podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only, and is not intended for the purposes of diagnosing, curing, treating, or preventing any disease. This podcast is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Before using any products or services referenced on this podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, carefully read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information found or received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem, or should you have any healthcare questions, please promptly call or see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Dr. Brian Marias, Deanna Weilbacher, and Hybrid Medical Solution, do not claim responsibility for any adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for any statements made by the guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referenced.
If you would like to submit any questions or if you have any topics you would be interested in hearing about on future episodes, please contact us through our website, www.hybridmedicalsolution.com. That is solution with no S at the end. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, all under Hybrid Medical Solution.